It's a 60-minute drive for a 60-minute game. After all the miles we've traveled, we're almost there. After all the hours we've worked, one more can make us legends. After all.
There you have it, folks. Game one is in the books. The Irish survive after leading most of the way, getting a little interesting at the end. Final score is 27-17. I'm here with, of course, Greg Rector. As you have me and Bill Carroll on the same screen for the first time in forever. And, of course, Brock Pierre. So, guys, we're going to start to recap this game real quick. But definitely, this has to have been one of the games where people were going, we didn't expect it to be this one-sided.
I didn't. I mean, I predicted 30-24 for the Irish. It's 27-17. Of course, the Irish are now singing Notre Dame, Our Mother, as they do at the end of every game. And it was a dominating performance by the Notre Dame defense. As I said, from my season preview article on, when Notre Dame wins, it's going to be because of this defense, and they showed up again tonight. Xavier Watts with that beautiful interception. Then, of course, Jeremiah Love got turned loose for that 98-yard touchdown, the longest touchdown run in Notre Dame history, and that was the ball game.
Brock, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Greg kind of hit everything on the head. Notre Dame completely outclassed the Indiana Hoosiers tonight. They were better in every aspect of the game. And then the only question mark in terms of Notre Dame's game would be the kicking game, which obviously we saw have success early. Yeah, they had a little bit of a hiccup late. By that point, the game was done and dusted. They made the critical kicks and the critical plays when they needed to. Jeremiah Love got things kicked off by a massive blown defensive assignment by Indiana and didn't look back from that point on. Exactly right there. It cannot happen at this level of football. This is the closest thing that you're going to get to see to the NFL right now in terms of these playoffs, in terms of strategy, intensity, and mental toughness. Notre Dame, more mentally tough, better athletes on the field, better coaching on the evening, great home environment, phenomenal performance.
Bill, your thoughts?
Well, what surprised me was the lack of adjustments, right? Kirk Cignetti, and rightly so, has won about 4 or 5 major coaching awards this year. And I was taken aback by how little they adjusted. I thought they might go 2 back. I thought they might go 2 tight end. There's so many things I thought they might do to try to make it harder for Notre Dame's defense. I thought they might, instead of throwing so many back shoulder fades, like I said, throw some, even attack. I mean, I thought they could attack the middle of the field in that sort of hole area with things like digs and, angle routes from the running backs. And there's things I thought were there for them. And even instead of throwing so many back shoulder fades, throw some Play-Doh go balls, right? And they didn't. They kept sort of going with the things they'd gone with, right? They kept trotting out the plays that they'd been using all season. I was a little surprised they didn't have more special things planned, right? You can't just line up and go at it with a team that has that dramatic an advantage in terms of athletic ability and in some positions size. I'm going to make it clear, Indiana's not a little football team, but there are some positions where they had a size disadvantage, and they had an athletic ability disadvantage at almost every position. And that showed up a lot. I talk about the recipe for success if you're an underdog to get the win, and they hit on about 0 of them. Something good has to happen for you quickly, almost immediately. And they sort of had that, right? That was the one thing that sort of happened, was that their early interception, but they couldn't capitalize on it. They didn't make fewer mistakes than Notre Dame. They didn't win the turnover battle. And they didn't get more big plays than Notre Dame. And so if you're the underdog and you want to pull off the upset, those are things. I mean, once again, the perfect example is Boise State, Oklahoma, right? Fiesta Bowl. They had special plays planned. They made fewer mistakes. They surprised Oklahoma by hitting them with things that they hadn't seen before. And I thought, though, Cignetti has a different mindset in terms of how he approaches football than we saw in that, the Boise State run. I still thought they would have self-scouted enough to know exactly what Notre Dame was going to try to take away and not lean so heavily on those things that Notre Dame was going to try to take away. But they did. They kept going with the same things. And that surprised me.
All right. So we're going to do a quick recap of this. Once again, the final score, Notre Dame 27, Indiana 10. The 7 takes out the 10 seed. 2 11-1 teams. Jeremiah Love, on the strength of that 98-yard TD run, 8 carries, 108 yards, and 98-yard TD. Riley Leonard, 23 of 32, 201 yards passing, 1 passing TD, 1 INT for Riley Leonard, and also a rushing TD to go along with it, tying Winbush's record for Notre Dame, rushing TDs by a quarterback. So let's go backwards. Okay, we come out. We expect both of these defenses to play tough. The Irish defense comes out. They get a stop. They drive down the field. They turn the ball over, turn it right back around. Here goes Indiana driving, gets in the red zone, turns it right back over. Yeah. This was the game we expected to see, and then something happened on that 98-yard run. Was it just the fact that Notre Dame hit them in the mouth and they didn't respond? Was it the lack of adjustments? Because it was a different game before that run.
Yep. Well, you had this sort of slog fest before that, right? Notre Dame was able to move the ball, but was, made that big mistake. And then if Indiana scores, even if it's a field goal, but scores and doesn't turn the ball over, I think that they settle in, it gives them some confidence, and it ends up being a tighter game. I still think they lose, but I think it ends up being a tighter game. I think it's closer to the game that Greg predicted. If they at least get a score there, a touchdown would be ideal, but at least a field goal. They start to feel like we're in this game, we belong here, we're doing okay. And some of the things that, the balloon sort of started leaking air. And the balloon started leaking air much more rapidly as the game went on. So, but yes, the run really started that leak. They never fully solved their protection problems. And I think the most important thing was they could not run the football. They could not get almost anything going in the run game themselves. So when you're giving up the most explosive play, in fact, the biggest run all year, right? The longest run in this college football season, a tie for the longest, or maybe the longest in the history of the very long Notre Dame tradition.
It is the longest run in. It
is the longest. Yeah, I knew it was either tied for the longest or the longest. So Nope. It is the longest. It's the longest one in college football this year as well.
Yeah.
That's not something you can afford to do. They made, for the most part, it was a good defensive effort. I'll make it very clear that they gave up a couple big plays, but for the most part, especially in the red zone, they played really good defense, which is why this game was close. In fact, this game would have been a true blowout, 40-something to, 10 or 17 or whatever, if that defense hadn't, every time until towards the end, they bowed their necks and held them to 3. The other thing that, like I said, stood out to me, Cignetti pointed out himself the missed tackles. And certain things just surprised me because this is a very assignment-sound football team. And I'll talk about the third phase, right? Offense, defense, special teams. One of the things I thought was a market advantage for Indiana was special teams. They are a very good special teams team. And Notre Dame is middling, generally, on special teams. And
No. The Fighting Irish have blocked 3 punts this year. They're not middling on special teams either. They play very well.
I'm averaging in also their problems in the kicking game, Greg. Like, you're doing the whole thing with well, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? Yeah, I get what you're saying, but if you put in their woes in the kicking game, they're very good in certain areas and terrible in one area, and it averages out to middling. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Their kicking game was actually quite good. In fact, they won, right? They sort of won. I mean, their punting was clearly superior, and their field goal specialists, who had injuries and all kinds of issues, had a very good game. So that was something I thought would be an advantage for
his name is Mitch Jeter, and he's a
Yes.
Jeter that you need to remember. His real name is Jeter. He's not Derek, though. He's not Derek.
He is not.
Okay.
He is not. I'm familiar with Mr. Jeter because he had a terrific year last year. I'm familiar with him and was surprised by the struggles that he'd had this year. So that was something. The two things I thought would be the big market advantages for Indiana. I thought that they would have the advantage in, like I said, there in the kicking game, and then also passing, especially deep passing. But they didn't do either of those things, right? They weren't very effective in the deep passing game, partially due to protection, but also Rourke was just off. He was just flat out off. He missed some, I won't say gimmies exactly, but he definitely missed some makeable passes. And a few times, his receivers let him down maybe a little bit, but he wasn't placing the ball well for much of the night. And
he was under the gun, though. He was under that gun.
Oh, I was going to say that much of this is because he couldn't set his feet. He's not a guy that can escape pressure easily. He's not entirely immobile, but he would much prefer to 1, 2, 3, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom, and the ball's out. When he has to sort of reset, move, and things like that, it reduces his effectiveness. And they did that to him all night. He had to move around way more than he wants to.
Considering his rushing yardage for the year was minus 25 going into this game, yes.
Right. But his main weapon is the RPO, and they kind of took that away by not stacking the box, right? They played coverage, they played a light box, and they said, we dare you to run the football and beat us because we believe our 4 can control your 5. And that's exactly what Notre Dame's defense did. They took that RPO away, which made him hold the ball and try and run and do all the other stuff that he couldn't do because he couldn't throw that in rhythm. I think that's the main factor in that whole situation. But the play of the Notre Dame defensive line changed that whole thing offensively for Indiana. They weren't expecting the fact they couldn't block their 4. They thought they could get second level in the running game. They weren't able to do it. They thought they would play a little more risky in the running game, allow them to get to the RPO. They weren't doing it. And I think that's what threw their whole offense out of rhythm. It wasn't something they expected out of the Irish. They expected a heavier pressure package. They expected a heavier box. They didn't get it. They didn't know how to adjust for it. And I think that's the biggest problem right there.
Well, Jack Kaiser also played a hell of a good middle linebacker game for the Fighting
Irish. He did.
And Xavier Watts and Snead both came up from the safety position, and they stoned potential outside runs for Indiana. And when that Hoosiers offense was trying to go up that middle, Riley Mills was there all night long. And that you just cannot compete against the Fighting Irish when they attack a running game as well as they do like that. And then on the passing game, as we said before, he was under the gun. Riley Leonard tonight, he found 10 different receivers. 10. Monty, where are you, Monty? He threw to 10 different receivers. Hi, Monty.
So let's put a quick bow on this, and we'll start to talk about the matchup with Georgia, and then we'll get into tomorrow's matchups real quick before we say goodnight to everybody, because we're back here tomorrow night, folks. So we're not going to be on 2 hours tonight. We're going to wrap this up in good form. We're going to be back tomorrow. So you'll get plenty.
That's because Bill has to go to bed.
There'll be plenty of.
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go.
There'll be more of our faces tomorrow night, folks. So we'll be back again. We got 3 games to talk tomorrow. We'll be here a lot longer.
I've made some cut-ups. I've got some all 22 ready. What are you talking about?
So Notre Dame, can they have this kind of success defensively versus Georgia next week? We know there'll be a different quarterback out there, more mobile quarterback, a guy that's going to use his legs and make bigger plays with his legs than what they've seen from Carson Beck all season long. Can this Notre Dame defense repeat this performance next week to give them a chance to go out there and beat Georgia?
I say yes, because they have attacked every single offense that they've played this year. They attack you 48% of the plays, they put pressure on you. So Al Golden has these guys lined up. You don't know where they're coming from because his blitzes are timed beautifully. And they come from players that you're not expecting to see. So Golden has the advantage in that aspect. As long as Riley Mills' knee is fine in 12 days, I think Notre Dame can give Georgia a very, very tough task. Trevor Etienne, meet Xavier Watts, meet Sneed. You're going to have a fun night, my friend.
I think here's the two things that jump out at me. Can Gunnar Stockton make enough plays throwing the ball? If he manages to hit even just 3 to 5 deep shots, I think that's the game, right? They're going to be able to run the ball, not easily, because nobody runs the ball easily, but they'll be able to run the ball better and differently for two reasons. One is they've got a higher quality offensive line. Indiana has a good offensive line, but Georgia has a better one. And their runners are guys who are going to get to that corner, right? Indiana has they're good running backs. They're not bad, but they can't turn the corner, right? These are guys that
they're one cut runners. They just hit the crease and go.
They're one cut, and more to the point, they're the kind of guys that they'll get what's blocked and a little extra, but they're not going to create. They're not going to make something happen, right? Etienne and some of the other running backs in Georgia are just a different level of running back.
Yes.
Their offensive line is going to be able to do some things that Indiana's offensive line wasn't able to do, but more importantly, or equally as important, I truly believe they're going to make better adjustments also. And I think they're going to go up tempo. I think they're going to go heavy at times. I was shocked in the end, didn't just decide, okay, you're going to stay light. Great. Here he has a face full of 2 tight ends, and here's 2 backs, right? Here's a fullback, or here's a wham blocker, or whoever it is, right? Here's 3 tight ends, right? Here's 13 personnel. Okay, you want to be light? Okay, boom, eat this. I was shocked that didn't happen. Georgia is definitely going to, if they have the same approach, is going to try to run them out of it, right? They're going to, and they'll have enough success that I think it will force them to start to creep forward a little bit, and that's where we'll have the opportunity to get some shots down the field. Now, can Gunnar Stockton hit them, right? That's the question, right? And none of us really know the answer to that. I mean, I'm not going to pretend.
He best be accurate at it, because Leonard Moore and Christian Gray will be sitting back there waiting for the interceptions, just as Xavier Watts will be.
Sure, right, and that's the point I'm making. Like, I don't know enough about Gunnar Stockton in that the term people like is high leverage situations where he has to make those throws, and they have to be, as you said, accurate enough that ball hawks from the defense aren't going to just snatch them. So that's why I said if he hits 3 to 5 deep shots, and I guess doesn't have 3 to 5 interceptions to match them, I should have thrown that in there as well. I think Georgia probably ekes one out. Georgia doesn't even have to win necessarily the turnover margin, but they can't lose it by too much, right? If they are even or 1 less than Notre Dame, they still have a chance to win. Now, if Notre Dame has a 2 turnover advantage, and one last thing I'll say, Riley Leonard will not have quite as pleasurable a day against Georgia's defense. No, and Indiana's a good defense. They have a good defense. I don't want to take away from Indiana's defense. They've had 2 or 3 guys that are definitely going to play in the NFL for 6 or more years. And Georgia's defense early in the year, we talked about this, didn't look like Georgia's defense. But as the year went along, it's like, this looks like the guys I'm familiar with. This is what I was expecting. The last part of the season, I started to see a Georgia defense that looks like a Georgia defense. If they continue to play like that, it will be I predicted, bet the under, right? This will be a lower scoring game. Now, I might look like a fool. It might, be 60-point score, but I don't think so. Unless Gunnar Stockton runs wild and Riley Leonard literally runs wild. Now, the problem with running against Georgia is they have a different level of athlete, right? Some of those things that busted for long runs against Indiana are going to go for 4 or 5 yards against Georgia, and some of those things that went for 4 or 5 yards are going to be tackled at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield. So, can Riley Leonard make it? It's like I said, but Gunnar Stockton. Can Riley Leonard make enough plays in the passing game? Also, I mean, everything I just said about Georgia could also be flipped around and said about Notre Dame. Can they make enough plays down the field to make Georgia respect the passing attack? Because Georgia's going to try to stop the run and say, yeah, try to beat us throwing the ball.
Now, let's flip it, because one of the issues with Georgia are slow starts.
Yep.
Will a slow start hurt them against Notre Dame, unlike old schools? Notre Dame is not going to come out there and throw up 40 against you like Bama tried to do, like Texas tried to do. Okay. They could come out and literally hold Notre Dame to 7 to 10 points in the first half and then come out in the second half all guns blazing and take the lead. That's been Georgia's MO all season long. Will that affect them, though, against this Notre Dame team the way they're playing right now?
Riley Leonard is going to run against the Georgia Bulldogs, just as he's run against everybody he's played against since he's been with Duke, since he's been with Notre Dame. He has run against very good defenses before. He's not going to be afraid to run the football. Malachi Starks and Javon Walker, you two are going to have to pay attention to number 13. You're going to have to pay attention to number 4. You're going to have to pay attention to Price, Aeneas Williams. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish can run the football against anybody in this country. I don't care who they are. I don't care who they are. They can run that football. Go ahead and shake your head, no, Brock. Go ahead, shake your head.
I don't mean to point out the truth of the situation, but they're not going to be able to run it against Georgia. I mean, yes, Notre Dame has played top-level defenses, but they haven't played a defense that has the mental strength of Georgia. This is not a college football defense. This is a near NFL level defense. They're just a little bit of gaps in terms of mental capacity and talent, but the gap between them and everybody else is very prevalent. Now, of course, they've been exposed in the past by running quarterbacks like Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart, but I don't believe Riley Leonard has the speed or acceleration of those guys. Alongside that fact, we saw after Jeremiah Love's massive touchdown, Notre Dame's ability to run him vanished, for lack of a better term. They had no success on there. Indiana, Notre Dame tonight wasn't exactly the model of offensive consistency. And let's not forget that there was a clear home field advantage playing in South Bend. They're going to have to go into a neutral site stadium, a place that Georgia is very comfortable in. They do it all the time for the SEC championship game. They had a season opener against Clemson on neutral site. So that nothing is going to be new to them. It's going to be business as usual. And for the Notre Dame team that is yet to play a defense that can cover the pass and the run as well in Georgia, I think they're in for a rude awakening. Now, getting to Jeff Barnes' point about a slow start, not only do I think it might be a slow start, I know for sure, at least as 99% sure, it's going to be a slow finish as well. This is not going to be a team that is going to be able to put up 14 or 17 points in the fourth quarter, even in the second half, on both sides. This is going to be a game that comes down to one team scoring a decisive touchdown late, whether that be Notre Dame scoring the lead or Georgia scoring the one to put it away. And if I had to put all my money in all my pockets on one of those scenarios, it's going to be that Georgia stops Notre Dame on the critical downs. And that is why I have no fear about the Notre Dame rush attack or the Notre Dame Fighting Irish entering this game.
We shall see.
Well said. So you talk about this matchup. So we have two defensive teams right now. And I think Georgia's going to be a little more defensive, being the fact that it's a less experienced quarterback. Yes, they've had a couple of weeks to practice and all that stuff. But the fact of the matter, it doesn't make up for the fact that you did a lot with Carson Beck. Carson Beck was allowed to do a lot of different things because he had that experience in the system for several years now as a starter. I think that you kind of lose that, the ability to see certain things when he's out there on the field in coverage, certain blitz looks, certain things that he hasn't seen. And granted, he sees a lot of that in practice, but you're not seeing other teams' looks. You're not seeing other teams' players coming at you. You're used to the guys you practice against every day. It's always different when you're in the game situation from practices because those guys move at a different speed than the guys you're used to facing. So I think that's where you're going to look at it. This matchup to me may mirror that Notre Dame Ohio State matchup from a year and a half ago, where it was a 7-3 game for most of the game. It ends up being 10-7. I think that's where you're going to look. I'm not going to predict the winner right now because it's a little early for that. But nevertheless, I'm just saying, I think that's where you're going to be in that area. It's going to be not 13-10, or 13-9, in that kind of realm where you're going to see this low scoring, controlled offense, controlled defensive kind of game where these two teams know we can't let one of these teams go out there and get hot offensively, and we can do a lot of things to slow that offense down. That's because one quarterback is limited in how he throws the football, and the other one is limited in experience. So I think that's going to be your big issue there is you have two teams with a quarterback that are saying, we can do this, but – and the other one is saying, he's kind of green, but we're going to make it happen. So
Jeff, just real quick, I just want to add on to that point where I think that a simplification of the offense is actually the remedy that's needed for the Georgia Bulldogs in this scenario. Not only does Georgia have a week of film, more film that they can study on Notre Dame based off how, of course, they played tonight, but then you look at their offense, whatever complex stuff they was doing, what they were doing was not working, at least working to success that you expect from a Georgia Bulldogs program. Alongside the fact that, unlike Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton provides a bit of a running element that has been missing for this Georgia offense as well. I think that if they get him on the move, whether that be through QB design runs or him just taking off with the football, it's going to make the Notre Dame defense hesitate enough to open up those very small gaps for players like Trevor Etienne, to run through. The last point that I want to say when it comes to this matchup is that something that we're really not talking about is the fact that there are aspects of this Notre Dame defense that you can see are significantly better than Texas, because Gunnar Stockton came into that Texas situation and handled himself accordingly. Now, of course, it's a different scenario, but when you think about the fact that he is an unexperienced quarterback, he got it done at the highest level without having experience. So I don't think that, though it will play a factor, I don't think it'll be playing as much as a factor as one might think.
Well, I think with the Texas argument, though, you're talking about two different styles of quarterbacks. One they didn't prepare for. They didn't prepare for Gunnar Stockton when Beck went out. So when you have a guy who does different things, your game plan was to attack the pocket. Now you have a guy who could break the pocket and beat that pressure that you were working on all week. I think that changes a lot of things for you. So I think that's where you sort of breakdowns in that Texas defense even more with Stockton out there was because they weren't prepared for a guy that could do the things he could do running the football and breaking the pocket and throwing on the move. So I think that's a different element that Notre Dame, now that they know that's who they're getting, that's what they're going to prepare for. It's different if they would have prepared for Beck and got Stockton, but now you know Beck isn't going to be there. It's Stockton is the guy you're preparing for, and I think they'll have a little better idea how to defend him versus opposed to what Texas had to deal with when he came in mid-game, and you got a different look than what you got. It's always like going from that pocket passer, and then all of a sudden Vince Young comes in the middle of the game and starts running on your defense. Okay, we didn't prepare for this. Now we got to change up what we're doing. It is kind of a culture shock because when you're used to attacking a spot in your pass rush, now you got to worry about containing a guy that you didn't have to worry about all week. It's a totally different thing.
I completely agree with you, Jeff. I just said that in the point of I don't think the moment is going to be too big for Gunnar Stockton. And I think Georgia's going to have the remedy for that by simplifying their offense, of course, going with a much more straightforward run-first approach. Obviously, it's going to be a big point if Notre Dame can hold Georgia to those 3rd and 5s or longer, see how Stockton handles himself on that kind of pressure. But I think, like I said earlier to my first point, this is a game that's going to come down to field goals, punts, strong defense that can score that critical touchdown late. I'm just saying that with Stockton, I think that not only is it going to be a perfect solution for the Bulldogs, he might be even the guy that elevates the Bulldogs in places that Beck could not.
Well, we got 3 games tomorrow, so let's touch on those before we go. First up, SMU, Penn State. What are your guys' thoughts on that matchup?
Well, I think.
Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, okay. I think that if Kevin Jennings is able to run for over 60 or more yards, pass for over 200 yards, and has 3 or more total touchdowns, SMU wins. I think if Penn State is able to make him either ineffective or average, and once again, their quarterback simply has to avoid making big mistakes. So to me, it's that. Can one quarterback play like a Heisman Trophy finalist? Can the other one essentially manage the game? If Penn State simply manages the game, right, putts for par, as I sometimes like to say, they'll walk away with the victory. They lose games where they make mistakes, particularly really poorly timed mistakes. And then SMU, I don't think people realize how much talent SMU has. People are talking about or treating SMU as if they were a group of 5 team or something. And they were not that long ago. I get that. But they are very talented, especially speed-wise. They may not have a lot of, enormous people, at least in certain positions they don't. But they have speed everywhere. They're one of the faster football teams at any level of competition. So can they get some big plays off of that? And once again, avoid making those mistakes. And the last thing I'll say, we just talked about coaching adjustments, in-game adjustments. Obviously, Rhett Lashley is a person who made his bones as a play designer and play caller before he became a head coach. I don't know if he's going to essentially take over or put together or take over certain things about how they run their offense with all the money on the table. I know some coaches prefer to trust their people, and some, maybe do a little less delegating when a big game is afoot. I'll be interested to see how that plays out. James Franklin, very famously, is sort of a guy that lets his coaches do a lot of the heavy lifting, and some people are critical of him for that. And we'll see how that approach works on the coaching side of it as well.
What about you, Brock?
I think that to add to what Bill has said, I agree with everything he said. But for me, this game is going to be the Abdul Carter walkout party. Of course, Abdul Carter is an All-American and one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. But I have made a prediction in a couple of draft communities. I want to say this for you all now. In these college football playoffs, Abdul Carter will record at least 6 sacks and play so well he will elevate himself into be a top 3 pick in this year's NFL draft. And I don't think he's going 3. I think that Abdul Carter has a perfect platform to really showcase his abilities and his mental fortitude. I think that he is going to be excellent at pass rush. I think he plays disciplined football and will be the perfect guy to contain Kevin Jennings. And when you look at the structure of the Penn State defense in general, there's going to be very small and tight windows that Jennings is going to have to throw the football. They're going to play contain on the pass rush, and Jennings doesn't really step forward unless there's a clear hole. He likes to run out the end. This is the Big Ten. Those defenders are fast enough to stop that. So I'm not too concerned on Jennings as others, even though I think he is a phenomenal talent. I just put those factors in compared with the cold that is in Pennsylvania right now. You don't run as fast when it's freezing, And then for Penn State, Drew Aller, a lot of guys are very high on him in the draft community right now. I've heard guys say that they have him as QB2. A couple people say QB1. I personally have him that high, but if he wants to really set himself up to be the consensus number 1 pick entering next year's draft, he is going to have to play phenomenally. I think that Penn State offensively, the offense coordinator, and the K for that project, I can't say Polish or Eastern European last names. I think that he's going to put him in position to succeed. You're going to see a lot of Keatron Allen, a lot of Nicholas Singleton rushing the football, maybe a lot of those shovel passes, sweeps, things of that nature, really spread out the SMU offense. And then you're going to watch Aller and company try and penetrate the middle with Tyler Warren. At least that's the way I perceive this game going. I think they have phenomenal success at it. And that's why I think Penn State wins this one easily.
Greg.
Yeah, SMU back in 1982 lost the national title to the Penn State Nittany Lions. That's the good old days of Ron Meyer being there and all that fun sort of stuff before they got their death sentence. But Penn State is going to put the hammer down on SMU. Abdul Carter, as Brock said, is going to light up Kevin Jennings because the SMU offensive line has not faced a guy like Abdul Carter, nor the other edge, Dennis Sutton, and really, It's gonna be a whiteout game, and SMU is going to be sent packing.
All right. Well, before we move on to that next game, I think this is going to be a tale of two cities. One of these teams has to keep the other one from getting out to a fast start and keep the scoring down to be more successful. I think the other one, if it's a shootout, is right in their element. I think Penn State is, if both teams are scoring, SMU is just fine. And I think that's what you're looking at in this situation. The more and more SMU keeps putting pressure on Penn State's defense, I think that's where Penn State runs out of gas. But if you see a slow start like you saw against Clemson, I think that's where SMU is going to be in trouble, because now they've got to try and keep up and play from behind it. When they're struggling to get things going, it takes them a while to figure things out. You saw that twice in their 2 losses this season. I think that's the formula to beat them. Slow them down early, confuse them, keep them down for a while, make them chase you. And I think that's your best bet. Now, you don't want them to go out there and tie it up at the last second where you're going to need a field goal like Clemson did to walk off. But I think overall, the main thing is make them play to your game, not play to theirs. All right, so game 2, okay, Clemson, Texas. Okay, this matchup a couple of years ago, people would have thought Texas doesn't have a chance. It's all Clemson. Now it's a little bit different. Everybody's expecting Texas to pull this one off. Everybody's thinking Clemson is there, but they're the underdog in this matchup. How do y'all guys feel about this one?
Well, Kate Cudlick did beat Quinn Ewers for the Texas High School Championship a few years ago. But I don't give him the same opportunity this time, because this Texas defense is just too tough. They're going to make life miserable for Clemson's offense. They're just going to be too tough for Clemson. I don't see Clemson's attack being able to penetrate the Texas defense as much.
How about you, Brock and Bill?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I think Texas wins one easily. I think they're too strong, too fast, too quick for Clemson to handle. Clemson's going to a 100,000 seat environment. It's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. Clemson has not shown the ability to be a winner at this level consistently throughout his entire career, and I don't see how that changes in the biggest test ever for him. I just think that Clemson, as a program, is finally starting to recognize changes in college football and are adjusting accordingly, but they're about a couple years too late, and this is going to be the ramifications of the lateness. Texas, as the beneficiary of the modern landscape, is too good, and they will boat race Clemson off the field.
Gotcha. All right, final matchup before we go. Tennessee, Ohio State.
Yeah.
We don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll kick it off. First game, I've been going back and forth on it for a long time because it's hard to root against Ohio State, especially when Ohio State plays in the shoe. Especially when they have so many weapons and they have the anger of losing to Michigan. And, Jeremiah Smith is, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in this country, bar none. I know people have Travis Hunter as the number one. Some people have Ted McMillan. Jeremiah Smith, Chris route runner, young phenom talent, consistent player, gets the ball and he holds it in when it throws to him. I don't know why they didn't go after him more during the Michigan game, because he'll start to light them up down the field. And I think that he is going to be a major difference maker. The problem is, I don't have faith in anybody else at Ohio State. I think Ryan Day is mentally checked out from the job. I think that JTT and Jack Sawyer have a tendency not to show up at random times. And the problem is they seem to never show up in the big moments together. I think that's going to be a massive issue. I think Nico is going to be safe in the pocket. I think that Dylan Sampson, one of the many underrated running backs in this country, is going to run rampant all over this Ohio State defense. And I'm telling you all right now, there's going to be a critical point in this game where Ohio State's going to be stopping like 3rd and 4. Jim Knowles is going to jump into a 3-3-5 defense for no reason, and they're just going to route the middle for the first down. Because Ohio State can't win the big games, not because they're not good enough to beat others, it's because they consistently beat themselves, and this will be another primetime example of it.
When I look at this matchup, I wonder about one thing. Is Tennessee physical enough to beat Ohio State? Because one of the things we know about Tennessee is they're a very finesse team, right? Defensively, they fly to the ball, yes. But offensively, the Heupel offense is high pace, finesse offense. They're not great at grinding it out and running it down your throat. They run the wide zone and the split zone and all that stuff where they're finessing and moving your bodies down the line of scrimmage. They're not moving you off the line of scrimmage. So when I see this team, are they? I mean, we know they're fast, but are they physical enough? One of the reasons why Oregon has consistently beat Ohio State is, yes, they're faster than Ohio State, but they're more physical than Ohio State 90% of the time. This team has a problem at times with physicality. So, I think that's the one thing I warn about this matchup. Are they physical enough to beat Ohio State? I think they're fast enough. I think they do a lot of great things on the perimeter that are going to test this Ohio State defense. But when it comes down to it, you got to be able to win in the trenches. Are they physical enough to do that? I have questions about that.
Will Howard is still the quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Mr. Pierce and the other front seven for Tennessee have played very good football all year long. The Ohio State Buckeyes offensive line is still banged up. Donovan Jackson's going to be playing left tackle yet again, even though he's going to be a starting left guard in the NFL. He's still going to be playing left tackle. I have the Tennessee Volunteers beating Ohio State, and Dylan Sampson has a huge, huge day.
Yeah, Seth McLaughlin, we don't talk about him being out enough. I mean, you're missing your All-American center.
Yep.
It's tough to win when you don't have a guy like that on the field.
Yep.
Well, we'll find out tomorrow.
We will.
We will be back. Bill, go ahead with your thoughts.
I was going to say that we are going to be reminded that these are college students, some of whom are taking final exams and things like that. So we throw around terms like, quasi-professional and, minor leagues for the NFL when we talk about college football, but it still is different for a couple of reasons. And when I look at each of these games, there's going to be a pivotal moment. I don't think we're going to see any of those games be like this one. I think that while somebody might end up winning by 10 or 13 points, they'll pull away late to do it. I think it'll be compelling and close. But just in each of these games, would be a pivotal moment, whether it be a fourth down that somebody goes for and gets or doesn't get, whether it be a tipped ball that bounces around and then somebody comes up with it or somebody doesn't come up with it, or a tip ball that the offense ends up getting a big play off of because the defense is all right. You can't help it. Like, you're transfixed by the football. And then if somebody, snags a tip and takes off, now they have a chance to get behind the defense. There's going to be something in each of these games we can point to and say, oh, that's where it changed. Tonight it happened super early, right? The 98-round run tilted the game. And that's what I'm thinking about. What will be the moment that tilts each of these games as we go through them? And, of course, we'll find that all out together. But I think that there's going to be some pivotal moment, probably not a 98-yard pivotal moment, but a pivotal moment in each of those games that changes it and turns, the tide for the team that ends up winning.
Folks, we're a little abbreviated tonight because we got 3 games to cover tomorrow. So we will be here a lot longer tomorrow night talking a lot more college football playoff. We wanted to get this matchup in and preview tomorrow's matchups. We did just that. We'll be back tomorrow night. We're not going to have a set time because these games tend to run over. So keep watching the social media. Keep watching YouTube. We will be back tomorrow night once the final game wraps up here on Team MBS Media. For Greg Rector, for Bill Carroll, for Brock Vieira, myself, Jeff Barnes, thanks for watching. We will be back tomorrow night when all the games are done.
See you tomorrow. We'll be there when you need us.